What you are about to experience is an alternate history of the world's greatest naval conflict, the Great Pacific War, where fleets clashed and the tides turned with every decisive engagement. Through the lens of Tetsuya Nakamura's acclaimed board game, Fire in the Sky, we will immerse ourselves in a reimagining of this epic and titanic struggle. In this reenactment, I will command the forces of Imperial Japan as I seek dominance over the Pacific, while the Allied war machine, led by the United States, Great Britain, and the Netherlands, will be directed by the Oracle, an ever-watchful and relentless opponent in pursuit of victory. So join me as we step back in time to the tumultuous days leading up to December 7th. This is Fire in the Sky, the Great Pacific War 1941 to 1945, where history is reborn and the echoes of war are reshaped during the course of the game.
Sir, I am Commander Satoru Takoshima. I will serve as your liaison officer to the Imperial Navy and Imperial Army General Staffs. The Navy General Staff has approved Admiral Yamamoto's audacious Hawaii operation, designated Operation Z. The Kido Butai, a formidable strike force comprising the fleet carriers Akagi, Kaga, Hiryu, Soryu, Shokaku, and Sulikaku, has been covertly assembled at Haitokapu Bay in the Kuril Islands, which will ensure absolute secrecy from American intelligence assets. Under the command of Vice Admiral Chuchi Nagumo, this fleet stands poised to undertake its grueling 3,000-mile voyage to its final launch positions, just 230 miles north of the Hawaiian archipelago. Once in place, it shall unleash a decisive and devastating strike that will cripple the U.S. Pacific Fleet, shattering American naval power in a single, destructive blow. In the Central Pacific, our forces will strike at the Gilbert Islands, taking the important atoll of Tarawa, along with occupying the American base at Wake. These islands will form an integral part of our defensive barrier in the Central Pacific. In the South Pacific, our forces will occupy Rabaul and La, and will serve as jump-off points for future attacks against Port Moresby and Guadalcanal. In the Dutch East Indies, a force from Palau will secure Brunei and their important oil production facilities. Our invasion of the American-held Philippine Islands will center on General Homa's 14th Army. It is vital that our air assets neutralize the American air forces at Clark Field, lest they interdict the transfer of oil resources back to the home islands. In Southeast Asia, General Ida's 15th Army will occupy Bangkok, in preparation for an assault on Rangoon, while our powerful land-based aircraft in Saigon will locate and sink the British battleships Prince of Wales and Repulse.
Hello everyone, this is Keith from the Solo Gamers Club and welcome to my channel. Join me tonight as we return to Tetsuya Nakamura's Fire in the Sky, the Great Pacific War, 1941 to 1945. In this playthrough we'll be executing Scenario 3, from Pearl Harbor to the Battle of Midway. Our time frame is going to be from turn 1, December 1941, through turn 3, April to June 1942. Scenario 3 is a short but very challenging scenario, starting with a very strong Japan, trying to expand very quickly. A lot of Allied bases to capture with tight time and logistical constraints creates many interesting options for military planners. On the other hand, the Allies have to use their smaller but very valuable forces very precisely, so every decision is hard. Now I've downloaded a few extra player aids that Phalanx Games offers on their website. We have an extended game turn track for the Japanese and another for the Allies, and that allows us to organize our reinforcements in a much better way. I've also downloaded an expanded sequence of play PDF, and I've printed that out. It can be folded and it can produce a 4-page, very handy expanded sequence of play. And it doesn't take up a very large footprint. It's one thing I like about Phalanx Games. They always offer extra free aids on their websites for their games, and really the only other game company that does that is Flying Frog Productions, but they're greatly appreciated. Now I'm going to be playing this historically correct for December 1941, meaning that the U.S. pre-war carrier response group of the Lexington and Saratoga, they're going to historically appear where they did in December 41, and that was somewhere off the coast of Midway. They were delivering aircraft to both Midway and Wake, and so we're going to make sure that the Lexington and Saratoga carrier battle group will not appear at Wake, Pearl Harbor, or any of the other locations. It will be at Midway Island. I've made one revision to my variant rules, and this one involves Rule 6, which is nothing is for certain. No matter how certain an outcome seems, the fog of war always deals surprises at the most unsuspecting times. This one revolves around Japanese airstrikes and their use of Japanese elite pilots. If we were to apply all of the dice roll modifiers for the elite pilots, which would be generally air supremacy, naval units at anchor, Japanese air point on turn 1, and Japanese elite pilots, that would produce an auto hit. So what we're going to do instead is, during the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, when the elite pilots will target those ships on Battleship Row, any rolls of 1, we're going to roll another d6. And on a result of 1 to 3, that is going to be a miss. On a 4 to 6, it will be a hit. So it gives us some variation to those, what would be an auto hit. And I don't like that. I like to have some variation to that. So that's the purpose of the rule. And we'll begin with the turn 1, December 1941 turn, and we'll go through our sequence of play. Japan will start the turn sequence, and we'll begin with their economic phase. Now, we don't have any oil to transport back to the home islands at this point, but what we can do is assign Japanese destroyer flotillas to the Japanese convoy escort box, and essentially these are going to be free moves for us during the first turn. We would spend the required transport points, 2 points per destroyer, but we're going to get those back at the start of the reinforcement phase. So in essence, we're able to place any destroyers that we choose to at this point in the game at no cost. I think at this point we're going to leave the Japanese convoy escort box empty. I'm going to need those destroyer flotillas for the first couple of turns, and if necessary, we can assign those at a future time. Next is the reinforcement phase. Now this is turn 1, so Japan and the Allies will not be receiving any reinforcements. But during this part of the turn, we will also reset our subpoints and transport points. In this case, Japan and the US have 2 subpoints, and Japan has a total of 60 transport points. That's equal to their merchant ship counter. Now we're going to move on to Japan's first deployment phase. And we're going to be moving forces to their forward bases for operational duties. We're going to begin in Southeast Asia, and the Japanese 15th Army at Saigon, under the command of General Aiya, is going to move in and occupy Bangkok. His job is to secure Bangkok and get in position to assault the British forces in Rangoon. In the Central Pacific, we're going to make one hex deployment with a naval force from Palau. And we're going to place the Zuiho and Shoho light carriers. They're going to make a 1 hex move to Truk Lagoon. And that's going to cost 0 transport points. Forming our Leh invasion force, the 2nd Division is going to redeploy from Kure to the Marianas. That's going to cost us 4 transport points. Forming the screening vessels for that invasion force, we're going to transfer a destroyer flotilla from Palau to the Marianas. It's going to cost us 1 transport. And then we're going to make 1 miscellaneous deployment. The heavy cruiser Tone is going to redeploy from Kure to Okinawa. And that's going to complete Japan's first deployment phase. We'll move on to our next step, and that is the operational movement. This is where the ground, air, and naval forces are going to move and attempt to attack enemy forces. We're going to begin with the Kido Butai. The date is November 26th, 1941. Forces based in the Kuril Islands under the command of Vice Admiral Nagumo. It's going to make its way 3,000 miles across the Pacific to Pearl Harbor. The date is now December 2nd, 1941. The Kido Butai is located about 900 miles north of Midway Island, and it is going to receive a radio message. And we are going to radio Admiral Nagumo the words, "Ni Takayama Nabore," climb Mount Nitaka. That is his code word to commence the Hawaii operation. It is now December 6th. The Kido Butai takes its position 230 miles north of Pearl Harbor. As per our special pre-war planning, Operation Z, we're able to move that force at a cost of 12 oil points. Next is our Gilbert Islands operations. The Nankai Brigade and a destroyer escort flotilla will form a task force in the Marshall Islands, and they'll move to the Gilbert Islands, and the Nankai Brigade will land on Tarawa. Our Wake Island invasion force will commence from Iwo Jima. We're going to activate the Special Naval Landing Force Brigade and a destroyer escort. That force will move to Wake Island. We're also going to create a Wake Island carrier support group centered upon the aircraft carriers Zuiho and Shoho, and a destroyer flotilla currently at Truk Lagoon. They're going to form a task force, a carrier task force, and move to Wake Island. Next is our South Seas operations. We're going to be making 2 landings, one in Leh and one in Rabaul. The Leh invasion force is going to consist of the 2nd Division and a destroyer escort from the Marianas. And we're going to designate them as a Tokyo Express. Tokyo Express counter will allow them to have basically a first strike in any surface combat. Force is activated in the Marianas, and it proceeds south-southwest to Leh. Next is our Rabaul invasion force. That's going to consist of the Ichiki Brigade, the heavy cruiser Takeo, and a destroyer flotilla at Truk. It's going to form a task force and move 2 hexes south to Rabaul. Next is our Brunei invasion force. It's going to consist of the Kawaguchi Brigade, along with the heavy cruiser Mogami and a destroyer flotilla at Palau. It's going to move 3 movement points to Brunei. Next is our Philippine Islands invasion force. General Hama's 14th Army will be escorted by the heavy cruiser Furataka and a destroyer flotilla at Formosa. It's going to move 1 movement point south to Manila. We're also going to form a carrier support group centered around the light carriers Hosho and Ryuko with a destroyer escort from Kure. It's going to move 3 movement points southwest to Manila. And that's going to complete Japanese operational movement. Japan's total dispersals for these operations will be 30 oil points and 45 transport points, leaving us with 30 oil and 15 transport remaining. Now we move on to the Allied reactions phase. Due to the surprise nature of the Japanese attacks, Allied responses are limited. The only forces that would be able to react would be the Australian Navy in Brisbane or the Dutch Navy in Surabaya. The British force in Singapore has basically 2 choices. It could sortie and move into Saigon, where it would be under air attack from full-strength Japanese land-based air units in Saigon, or they can remain in Singapore and they would have to undergo aerial attacks. And as I said earlier in the video, the U.S. pre-war response carrier group, consisting of the Lexington and Saratoga, we're going to deploy those at the historical location that they were at, in this case, Midway Island. I've made rolls on the Oracle for the Allied forces in Brisbane, Surabaya, and Singapore, and all those forces will remain in port. They will not react. Next is the Japanese air commitment phase, and we're going to be committing our land-based aircraft to operations. First, we're going to commit 8 air factors from Saigon to port attack in Singapore. Then in Formosa, we're also going to commit 8 land-based air factors towards operations over Manila. And that's going to be the extent of Japanese air commitment. Now we'll move on to the combat phase. We begin the combat phase with the submarine attack segment. Target determinations will be Japanese submarine is going to target the Lexington and Saratoga carrier group operating off Midway. The U.S. player has elected to save his 2 submarine points for use against Japanese merchant shipping. U.S. destroyers will go into anti-submarine warfare. They're going to receive +1 to the rolls because the carrier air group is around for spotting. And they are successful, and the Japanese submarine is sunk. Now we're going to resolve the Pearl Harbor attack. The Kido Butai consists of 11 carrier-based aircraft. The U.S. has 4 points of land-based aircraft. Due to the nature of the surprise attack, Japanese will conduct their air combat first, and losses will be applied to the U.S. The planes are basically on the ground. Japan will be rolling a total of 11 dice, of which 7 of them will be elite pilots. The elite pilots will be rolling red dice. Standard pilots will be rolling white dice. Japanese elite pilots will be receiving +2 dice roll modifier. Their standard pilots +1. Japan has a total of many hits, enough to destroy the planes on the ground. They've managed a total of 8 hits. That will reduce the U.S. air power to 0, and that's going to give Japan air supremacy. Japanese strike aircraft consist of 7 squadrons of elite pilots and 4 squadrons of standard pilots, and they're going to do their target determinations. 3 elite squadrons and 2 standard squadrons will attack the U.S. Air Forces on the ground. 4 elite squadrons and 2 standard squadrons will launch torpedo attacks against the U.S. naval forces in port. The individual Japanese torpedo attack squadrons are assigned as indicated. We'll begin by resolving the strike on the U.S. air bases. Japan will be rolling 3 elite dice and 2 standard dice for their attacks on the U.S. Air Forces. Japanese elite squadrons will be gaining +3 to the roll, standard squadrons +2. And here's the attack. Japan has scored a total of 4 hits that will permanently destroy the U.S. aircraft on the ground. These squadrons, having completed their runs, will return to their carriers. Now we'll commence our torpedo attacks on Battleship Row. First attack will be elite pilots from Akagi, and they are targeting the Maryland and West Virginia. They're going to receive a +4 dice roll modifier. In the event of a roll of a 1, we're going to re-roll it, and on a 1, 2, or 3, it will be a miss. Here's the attack roll. Roll is a 2, and that is a hit on the Maryland and West Virginia. Next is the attack by pilots from Akagi on the Pennsylvania and Arizona. Result is a 6, and that is a hit. And we will mark it accordingly. Having made their runs, pilots will return to their carrier. Next, carrier pilots from the Kaga target California and the Tennessee. And they've hit them. Carrier pilots from the Hiru and Soryu target Nevada and Oklahoma. They've hit them. Standard pilots from the Shokaku target the light cruiser Omaha. And they have hit the Omaha. Finally, standard pilots from Zuikaku target the heavy cruiser New Orleans. They scored a hit. Now we'll check for the damage on each of the units. We'll begin with the damage on the Maryland. It has an armor rating of 10. Japan will be gaining +1 for airstrike hit and +1 for Allied unit on a part of turn 1. Rolls a 12. The Maryland and West Virginia are sunk. Next, we'll check for damage on the Pennsylvania and Arizona. Ship is damaged. Next is the damage on the California and Tennessee. Ship has been sunk. Next is the Nevada and Oklahoma. And it is heavily damaged. Next is the light cruiser Omaha. And the ship is sunk. And finally, we will check the damage on the New Orleans. New Orleans is sunk. So the effects of the Pearl Harbor attack are Maryland and West Virginia are sunk, along with the California and Tennessee, light cruiser Omaha, and New Orleans. Heavily damaged are the Pennsylvania and Arizona, and Nevada and Oklahoma. Captain Fujita surveys the damage and radios back to Admiral Nagumo. Next, we shift to the Gilbert Islands, and the Nankai Brigade will land on Tarawa unopposed, taking that important atoll for Japan. Next, we're going to resolve the Japanese attack on Wake Island. We'll begin with the air-to-air combat. The light carriers Zuiho and Shoho will provide Japan with 2 air points. The U.S. has 1 point of land-based aircraft. We'll begin with the Japanese attack. Japanese pilots will receive a +1 modifier. They've scored 2 hits. U.S. air power is reduced to 0. Japan has 2 squadrons of strike aircraft, and they will target the U.S. airstrip. Japan has air supremacy. Japanese aircraft will receive +2 dice roll modifier. They have scored 2 hits, destroying the U.S. air power on Wake. Japanese destroyers will move to take control of the seas, landing the Special Naval Landing Force Brigade. And Japan has taken Wake Island. Next, we move to the South Pacific. The Achiki Brigade lands unopposed, taking Rabaul. In Leh, Japanese 2nd Division lands and occupies that important base for Japan. In Brunei, the Kawaguchi Brigade lands and occupies very important oil production facilities in Brunei. Now in the Philippines, General Hama and his 14th Army land in Luzon, push forward towards Manila. The battle for Manila, Japan has 8 land-based aircraft. Those are long-ranged aircraft, giving them a total of 4 air points. An extra point is also supplied by carrier-based aircraft from the light carrier Hosho and Ryuho, giving Japan 5. The United States has 2 points of aircraft at Clark Field and General MacArthur's 6th Army. We'll begin with the Japanese air attacks. Japanese aircraft have surprise, and they'll be adding +1 to the rolls. And they've scored 4 hits. It's going to reduce the U.S. tactical air power to 0, giving Japan air supremacy. Japan has a total of 5 strike aircraft. They're going to assign 4 squadrons to attack Clark Field, and 1 will provide ground support against MacArthur's 6th Army. We'll begin with the air attacks on Clark Field. Japan will be rolling 4 dice. Japanese strike aircraft will gain a +2 modifier. And they have rolled a total of 3 hits, destroying the land-based aircraft at Clark Field. Japanese destroyers will take control of the seas around Manila, and General Hama's 14th Army will land in Luzon. We'll resolve the Japanese ground support. We have 1 squadron of attack aircraft and the gunnery strength of the heavy cruiser Furutaka. As Japan has air supremacy, they will be receiving +1 dice roll modifier. They've scored 1 hit against MacArthur's 6th Army. General Hama's 14th Army will launch their attack on MacArthur's 6th Army. Hama is in supply, hitting on a 5 or 6. MacArthur's force is isolated because of the lack of sea control, and they will only be hitting on 6s. Here's the Japanese attack. Japan has scored a total of 2 hits. Moving the damage up to 3 on the 6th Army. General MacArthur's 6th Army will counterattack at Bataan. And he has a total of 1 hit. Casualties are applied. 6th Army has taken 3 points of damage, the 14th 1 point, and General MacArthur's 6th Army is reduced. The U.S. 6th Army is forced to retreat to the Bataan Peninsula. And now we'll resolve the Japanese air attack at Singapore. Japan is attacking Singapore with 8 factors of long-ranged aircraft, giving them 4 air points. British, the RAF is not present. This is going to give Japan air supremacy. Japan has 4 squadrons of attack bombers, and they will target the ships at anchor. They're going to place 3 squadrons against the Repulse and Prince of Wales, and 1 squadron against the C-class destroyers. The 3 squadrons against the Repulse and Prince of Wales have a +3 modifier. They scored a total of 3 hits. 3 hits will be placed on the Prince of Wales and the Repulse. Now we'll resolve the attack on the C-class destroyer. That will also receive a +3 modifier. It's a hit, scoring 1 hit on the C-class destroyers. Now we'll resolve the damage. The first hit on the Repulse and Prince of Wales will gain the following modifiers. First hit against the Repulse and Prince of Wales will receive a +2 dice roll modifier. The result is a 4 that's modified to a 6, and that is 1 point of damage. The second hit will receive +1 in addition to the normal +2. They'll be adding +3 for additional hits. The result is a 12. The Prince of Wales and Repulse are sunk. Now the attack damage on the C-class destroyers. They will be at +2. Rolls a 2, modified to a 4, and the C-class destroyers are damaged. General Aida's 15th Army marches into Bangkok and secures that important location for Japan. We move on to the Japanese return to base segment. All forces will return to the port of Kure. All Japanese forces have returned to Kure. The American carrier group at Midway returns to the U.S. West Coast. We move on to the Japanese second deployment. Japan has a total of 15 transport remaining. Japan is going to relocate the carriers Hiru, Soryu, Zuihu, Shoho, and 2 destroyers from Kure to Palau. That will cost us a total of 7 transport points, moving the Japanese total down to 8. During the end phase, Japan will garner 6 victory points for conquests of Bangkok, Brunei, Lae, Rabaul, the Gilberts, and Wake Island, moving their victory point total up to 26. And that is going to complete the Japanese portion of December 1941.
Sir, the triumphant execution of Operation Z has surpassed even our most ambitious projections. The Navy General Staff urges you to seize this moment and press the advantage against the Americans while we wield unparalleled qualitative and quantitative superiority. Yet, the absence of their aircraft carriers at Pearl Harbor casts a shadow over our victory, leaving their whereabouts an enigma that must be unraveled. If these elusive warships can be lured into battle and utterly annihilated, the enemy will find itself stripped of any meaningful resistance in the vast expanse of the Pacific. Such a decisive stroke would cement our dominance and ensure that our path forward will remain unchallenged.
We move on to the Allied portion of Turn 1. The United States is not in a good way at this point following the Pearl Harbor attack. The extent of their forces in the Pacific consist of 2 destroyer flotillas at Pearl Harbor, Bull Halsey's carrier force, the Lexington and Saratoga, that is returned to the U.S. West Coast, and that's it. That is the extent of surface assets for the United States. Now, they have 4 battleships that are under repair at Pearl, and that is the Nevada and Oklahoma, and the Pennsylvania and Arizona. Those will be returning next turn. First step is the U.S. portion of the economic phase. The United States has reserved 2 submarine formations, and they're going to use those to attack Japanese merchant shipping. Japanese have no destroyer or destroyer escort assets in the box, so we'll be rolling 2d6, and we're going to cause a merchantman loss on a hit of 5 or 6. Here's the U.S. attack on Japanese merchant shipping. And they have 1 hit. And that is going to cause 2 points of damage to the Japanese merchantman fleet. Japanese merchantman fleet will be reduced from 60 down to 58. We'll move on to the Allied reinforcement phase. They will get no reinforcements, but will reset their subpoints to 2, and U.S. transport to 24, UK transport to 12. Japan has 1 subpoint remaining from the previous activation. Also, they're going to use their free transfer from the west coast to Pearl Harbor, and they're going to move Bull Halsey's carrier force from the west coast to Pearl. In addition, following the devastating Pearl Harbor attack, General Short and Admiral Kimmel are going to be sacked. And Chester Nimitz will take over as commander of Central Pacific. Now we're going to move on to our first deployments. Following Japan's first moves during Turn 1, new locations now become eligible for Japanese invasion. With the capture of Wake, Midway now becomes a possible target. Same with Ellis, which is now in range of the Gilberts for an amphib operation. The same goes for Guadalcanal and Espiritu Santo. With the capture of Brunei, Surabaya becomes a potential target of invasion, as does Leyte. The Allies are going to have to make some tough choices with very limited assets during Turn 1. The United States only has 24 transport points available on Turn 1. They're prohibited from making any amphib operations. U.S. is going to break down the 2-point land-based aircraft they have in Samoa, and they'll put that into 2 single area groups, one of which is going to use 1 hex deployment and relocate to Ellis. That'll cost 0 transport. Then the U.S. is going to transfer that air group in Samoa to Port Moresby, and that's going to cost 1 point and another point to get it to Port Moresby. So their transport points are down to 22. In addition, they're going to reinforce their position at Port Moresby, moving the 8th New Zealand Brigade from Fiji to Port Moresby. That will also cost 2 points, moving them down to 20. U.S. is going to transfer the 19th Regiment from Pearl Harbor to Garrison Midway. That will cost 2 points, moving them down to 18. In addition, they're going to transfer the 21st Regiment to Ellis, and that will also cost 2 transport, moving them down to 16. And finally, the U.S. is going to order Bull Halsey's carrier group. They'll relocate them from Pearl Harbor to Noumea. It'll be 2 jumps of 4 movement points each. First to Ellis, and then on to Noumea. It'll cost a total of 16 transport, and U.S. transportation is down to 0. In the Far East, Britain's position is pretty much locked. They're unable to move forces in Ceylon, Rangoon, and Calcutta. That leaves their only force, the Malayan Command in Singapore, and Percival really has no option other than to just garrison that location. U.S. will move on to the operational phase, and they're going to make no operational moves at this time. We'll move on to the reaction phase, but Japan is not going to make any reaction moves. The Allied Air Commitment phase, Allied Air Forces will be committed in the hexes that they occupy, Port Moresby and in Ellis. There will be no combat, no return to base, and no second deployments. And we'll move on to the U.S. portion of the end phase. No bases have changed hands, so the victory points remain at 26. And that is going to complete Turn 1 of our playthrough of Fire in the Sky. The game turn marker will be flipped to the Japanese side, and we'll advance to Turn 2, and that's January through March 1942.